A six-sided twisting puzzle.
High performance from your tape deck. Get the high-performance tape.
Back then, if you didn't have this, you weren't just out of the loop, you were invisible. What secret signs of popularity did we lose when the 1980s faded away? Wearing a Swatch watch was like flashing your identity in bright neon on your wrist. It was not just about knowing the time. It was about showing the world that you were someone who got it. These watches were loud, colorful, and full of personality, a perfect match for a generation that hated being boring. Whether it was wild geometric patterns or translucent plastic faces, every swatch felt like a tiny revolution. Kids showed off their newest designs like they were luxury goods. The louder the color combo, the more respect you got. Some kids wore two at once just to double the impact. And if you had a limited edition one from Europe, you were basically untouchable. Kids would compare collections between classes like stock traders flaunting portfolios. The more outlandish your watch, the cooler you were. There were fashion trends, and then there were statements. Swatch watches were both. Everyone had their favorite, the one that screamed their name without a single word. If your wrist was bare, you were missing the moment. Swatch was how you told the time, and told the world you mattered. And if someone caught you wearing the same one as them, that meant you were both ahead of the curve. Matching watches were more than coincidence. They were instant connection. Mastering the Rubik's Cube was like cracking a code only the elite could understand. It was not just a toy. It was a badge of genius, patience, and insane hand-eye coordination. Classrooms turned into arenas the moment someone took out that colorful block. Eyes locked in, hearts raced. Speed was everything. Solve it in front of a crowd and you were immortal. There were underground cube clans, kids who traded secrets like magicians. Everyone swore they knew the true method, but only the fastest proved it. And if your cube had stickers peeling off from overuse, that was the mark of a real champion. If you could solve it in under 2 minutes, you were instantly mythologized. The clack of turning tiles became the soundtrack of every overachiever's rise to playground fame. Kids would practice at lunch, during recess, even under their desks when teachers weren't looking. Owning a Rubik's Cube said you were smart. Solving one in public made you legendary. Everyone else was still figuring out how to line up one side. You were already 6 steps ahead, literally. And if someone challenged you to a cube off in front of a crowd, that was your moment to become a hallway legend. Beat the clock, beat the crowd, and the cube was your throne. Owning a boombox in the 1980s was like declaring yourself the neighborhood's unofficial DJ and public icon. You did not just play music, you blasted it. On sidewalks, in parks, at bus stops. You hoisted that thing on your shoulder, and the streets became your concert hall. A good boombox said you had taste, attitude, and maybe a little rebellion in you. It was your voice when words failed, your vibe when you walked into a crowd. The louder your bass hit, the more heads turned. You measured popularity in volume. If you had fresh batteries, you were the party starter. And when the music dropped during a summer block jam, all eyes were on you. People would pause mid-conversation to listen in on your mix. Everyone had tapes, but only the popular ones had the machine to bring them to life. Your music became everyone's mood. You were not just cool, you were a walking soundtrack. The better the bass, the better the clout. If someone asked to borrow your boombox, they were not just asking for sound, they were asking for status. And if you said yes, you were instantly the most generous legend on the block. Acid wash jeans were not subtle. They were loud, unapologetic, and full of that brash energy that defined the 1980s. If your jeans looked like they had been struck by lightning, you were doing it right. These were not just denim. They were rebellion in fabric form. Everyone tried their hand at DIY bleaching, even if it meant ruining a perfectly good pair. The streakier, the better. You were not just wearing jeans. You were making a statement against boring fashion. And if your jeans matched your jacket, that was an unofficial uniform of the fearless. Every rip, every bleach splotch told a story, usually one about a wild night, a great party, or a terrible idea that somehow paid off. The cool kids wore them to school, to the mall, and even to church. No event was too formal for a properly trashed pair of acid wash jeans. Add some pins, patches, or chains, and you were a fashion hurricane. If you showed up in clean blue denim, you might as well have walked in wearing your dad's khakis. And if your jeans were custom bleached at home, that meant you were part artist, part outlaw. Even your clothes broke the rules, and that made you unforgettable. Beating Pac-Man was not just about hand-eye coordination, it was about hierarchy. The arcade was where status was made, and Pac-Man was its golden throne. Crowds would gather behind your shoulders, watching you dance around ghosts like it was second nature. Everyone knew the patterns, but not everyone had the nerve. Only the brave and bold survived to the higher levels. Every extra life you earned was an extra minute of glory. People whispered about who held the top spot like it was urban legend. There was always one kid who could play for an hour straight without dying. He was arcade royalty. And when you finally cracked a new high score, you felt like the king of neon-lit destiny. If your initials stayed on the high score list, you owned that machine. Some people practiced for weeks just to dethrone you. Quarters were power, and Pac-Man was how you spent them wisely. Win the game, win the respect, and sometimes win the heart of the person watching you play. If the machine glitched from too many quarters, you knew it had seen legends. And if the guy behind you groaned when you hit another level, that was the sound of admiration in disguise. Wearing shoulder pads was like walking into a room and daring someone to underestimate you. They made you bigger, louder, bolder. Girls strutted through high school hallways looking like they had just walked off a corporate runway. Power dressing was not just for adults anymore. Even teen jackets had those soft blocks sewn in, turning every student into a confident force of nature. These were not just fashion, they were shields. They told the world you were not afraid to take up space. They said you belonged in boardrooms, even if you were still stuck in biology class. You were not just stylish, you were powerful. The world might have been complicated, but your silhouette, that was untouchable. The more exaggerated the pads, the more you looked like someone with something to say, and people listened. You were not just keeping up with trends, you were staring them down. And if someone asked where you got your jacket, that was the 1980s version of a mic drop. Cassette tapes were sacred. They carried your favorite songs, your heartbreaks, your late-night confessions. Making a mixtape was like writing a diary no one else was allowed to read, unless you gave it to them. The right mix could win over a crush, define a friendship, or perfectly score a summer. You would rewind, fast forward, and flip sides like it was a dance. Tapes wore out with love. You could judge someone's soul by their mixtape. Every pause and track order meant something. It was not just music, it was a message. You listened with headphones, but the emotions were anything but private. Mixtapes were memory machines, capturing entire seasons in side A and heartbreaks in side B. If one popped or got tangled, it felt like losing a piece of yourself. The hiss, the clunk, the warm analog sound. None of it was perfect, but that was the point. Real life never is. And if someone gave you a tape with handwritten track titles, that was love in its purest, rawest form. Those little plastic rectangles held more emotion than most texts today. Jelly shoes were plastic, flashy, and barely made sense, but that was exactly the charm. If your feet glistened like glass, you were halfway to being Cinderella of the blacktop. They came in every color imaginable and often looked like something a mermaid might wear. Fashion in the 1980s was not about scents. It was about sparkle. Kids would trade colors, match them with scrunchies, and suffer through the inevitable blisters just to be part of the look. Comfort was optional. They squeaked when you walked and sparkled when you stopped. Every girl who wore them felt like part of a secret glitter society. They were impractical, slippery, and sometimes tore apart mid-recess, but no one cared. Popularity often came at the cost of common sense, and jelly shoes were worth every step. If you had the clear glitter pair, you were basically royalty. Popularity was the prize. And if you wore jellies to school on a sunny day, you were unstoppable. Every click-clack on the hallway floor announced you like a drum roll. You were walking glitter, irresistible, impractical, unforgettable. If you missed a night of MTV, you missed the conversation. It was not just a music channel. It was the cultural nerve center of the entire decade. Watching MTV meant you knew the dances, the fashion, the rumors, and who was climbing the charts. You were not just watching artists, you were becoming part of their world. Music was no longer background noise. It was a visual, immersive obsession. Kids would rush home to catch the world premiere of a new video or stay up late just to see their favorite one again. Even commercials were cool. You timed your bathroom breaks around them just to not miss the next Prince premiere. MTV turned everyone's living room into the front row of pop culture. You memorized entire dance routines in front of the screen. And if you called into a video countdown and got through, that was bragging rights for weeks. MTV was more than a television channel. It was a lifestyle broadcast in color, rhythm, and raw energy. Knowing the choreography to Madonna's latest video meant you were part of a secret club. And if someone asked what channel the video aired on, you would just smile. They already knew. Garbage Pail Kids were everything adults hated and kids adored. Gross, hilarious, and always outrageous, these trading cards turned playgrounds into underground comedy clubs. You did not just collect them, you competed with them. The grosser, weirder, or rarer the card, the more respect you earned. Schools tried to ban them, but that only made them cooler. Entire recesses were spent in trades, arguments, and dramatic unveilings of new editions. Some kids had entire binders organized by vomit level or fart factor. Others stored theirs in plastic sleeves like museum pieces. It was serious business. Each card felt like it was written by a kid who finally got to speak the truth. You were not just collecting stickers, you were flipping off the system with a smile. If you had a complete set, you were untouchable. It was rebellion in sticker form, and everyone wanted in. They were satire wrapped in snot and sarcasm. And if someone had a mint-condition atom bomb, that kid might as well have been royalty. Owning a Trapper Keeper was the academic equivalent of pulling up in a convertible on the first day of school. This was not just a binder, it was a status symbol, an organized explosion of color and personality that shouted, "I am put together, and I look good doing it." You could hear the Velcro rip from across the room, and everyone would glance over, wondering what dazzling design you were rocking this semester. Neon zigzags, radical lightning bolts, maybe a glossy holographic sunset over a chrome grid. Trapper Keepers were loud, flashy, and full of promise. The pockets were perfect for stashing secret notes, stickers, and folded paper games. The ring binder never jammed, and the folders inside came preloaded with your academic hopes and doodled dreams. Owning one meant you were ready for anything. Teachers loved them. Classmates envied them. They were the one school supply that made people jealous, the academic flex of the decade. Kids who had one seemed just a little more in control, like maybe they really could ace that pop quiz and still look good doing it. And if someone accidentally grabbed yours by mistake, that was not an accident. That was admiration in disguise. The Trapper Keeper was not just about homework. It was about holding your whole life in one slick, stylish place, and everyone knew it. Participating in aerobics classes in the 1980s was not just about fitness. It was a fashion statement, a social movement, and a ticket to popularity all rolled into one. If you showed up in a bright leotard, high cut on the hips, layered over colorful leggings with leg warmers scrunched just right, you were already winning. Throw in a headband, some white sneakers, and a Walkman blaring Jane Fonda's latest cassette, and you were unstoppable. Aerobics classes were everywhere. Community centers, high school gyms, living rooms turned sweat zones, and everyone who was anyone showed up to bounce, stretch, and grapevine their way to glory. It was never just about exercise. It was about visibility. You went to be seen, to be part of something electric and energetic. The moves were fast, the beats were faster, and the popularity points were practically aerobic themselves. If you could keep up with the choreography, you earned your spot in the social spotlight. People did not just remember your moves, they remembered how good you looked doing them. Some kids recorded routines on VHS tapes just to practice, perfecting every turn and toe tap before bringing it to class. And if you were the one leading warm-ups, that was social royalty. The whole world was sweating to the oldies, and the ones who stood out in those classes stood out everywhere else too. Being in aerobics meant you were glowing, literally and socially. Wearing a members-only jacket was like putting on cool itself. These sleek, cinched-at-the-waist jackets had that smug little logo on the chest that said everything without saying a word. If you had one, you did not need to try hard. You were already part of an exclusive club, whether or not you knew what the club was actually about. They came in sharp neutrals and daring colors, with epaulets that made you look like you meant business, even if you were just on your way to homeroom. The moment you zipped it up, you felt like you belonged to something bigger, slicker, and somehow better. Celebrities wore them. Athletes wore them. And if you wore one, you were automatically upgraded in every hallway conversation. These jackets did not just keep you warm, they kept your rep untouchable. They whispered, "Fashion forward," while everyone else was shouting for attention. You could layer it over a graphic tee or a turtleneck and still look like you stepped out of a magazine. And if someone asked to try it on just for a second, that meant they wanted your life. Members Only was not just a brand, it was a teenage passport to instant style. Winning a sticker collection battle on the playground was more intense than any sports game. Puffy stickers, scratch and sniff, glittery holographics, these were currency, trophies, and declarations of personality all in one. Your sticker book was your soul bound in spiral pages. You did not just collect stickers, you curated them. Every sparkly dolphin, rainbow teddy bear, or dancing unicorn had a backstory. You would trade, negotiate, and sometimes outright bribe your way into getting that one limited edition that no one else had. At recess, kids would gather in circles, flipping through albums with reverence usually reserved for ancient scrolls. A well-placed Lisa Frank page could make you the queen or king of the week. If someone gasped at your glittery pizza slice sticker, that meant you had won. You could tell who was on top just by the thickness of their collection and the pristine state of their unused pages. But the boldest move? Actually using one. Stick it on your notebook or trapper keeper. And it meant two things. You had great taste, and you were rich in sticker confidence. The wars were short, the battles sweet, and the victories unforgettable. Sporting Ray-Ban Wayfarers was the ultimate shortcut to looking iconic. These were not just sunglasses. They were instant charisma, a frame for your face and your identity. Everyone from Tom Cruise in Risky Business to Madonna in 100 music videos wore them like a signature. When you slid on a pair of Wayfarers, you did not just block the sun, you blocked out the ordinary. The thick black frames were bold, sleek, and impossible to ignore. At school, if someone had them tucked into their shirt collar, you knew they were popular. They gave off this energy, like you had somewhere better to be, even if you were just walking to third period. People did not ask if they were prescription. They just asked where you got them. These sunglasses meant mystery, meant glamour, meant you were living in a music video and everyone else was just background dancers. If you pulled them off during a conversation, instant movie star move. Ray-Ban Wayfarers turned average kids into walking main characters. Watching The Breakfast Club was not just about seeing a movie. It was about understanding who you were. This film hit differently. It made you feel like someone finally saw what high school actually felt like on the inside. Everyone picked a character to identify with: the brain, the athlete, the basket case, the princess, the criminal, and you wore that identity like a secret badge. Quoting it out loud in class was risky. You might get a detention or a new best friend. It was edgy, raw, and totally unforgettable. People watched it alone to cry and watched it in groups to connect. Owning a VHS copy was like owning a tiny rebellion. If you knew the final dance, the last fist pump, or the meaning behind "Don't You Forget About Me," then you knew more than pop culture. You knew people. You understood what it felt like to be misunderstood and still want to be seen. The movie ended, but the feeling stayed. Being in the BMX bike crew meant your status extended far beyond school grounds. If you had a BMX bike with custom pegs and could pull off tricks without wiping out, you were untouchable. Saturday afternoons became proving grounds in empty parking lots and back alley ramps. Riding with your crew meant freedom, adrenaline, and swagger. You would race, bunny hop, and coast on one wheel like it was nothing. Your crew had nicknames, code words, and an unspoken rule: ride or be forgotten. It was not about having the nicest bike. It was about riding like you owned the world. Scraped knees and elbow pads were battle scars, and every tire mark on the pavement was your signature. The jumps felt like flying, and the landings felt like thunder. Being in the crew was like having your own tribe. If you showed up with a new trick, heads turned. If you wiped out and got up laughing, respect doubled. You were not just riding, you were writing your name in motion. Playing with Transformers toys was the closest thing to magic a kid could hold. These were not just action figures. They were engineering marvels that turned from cars to robots and back with a few slick moves. One moment it was a truck, the next it was a towering warrior ready for battle. Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Starscream, these names were more than characters. They were myth, legend, obsession. You did not just play with them, you performed. Every transformation was a small victory, every battle an epic saga. Show up at school with a new Transformer and you were mobbed during recess. Kids would gather around just to watch the change. The clicks, the pops, the satisfying final snap into place. It was choreography. The coolest kids knew all the steps by heart. If yours still had all its parts in original packaging, that was God tier. Transformers were not toys. They were legacy. Wearing parachute pants meant you were ready to spin, slide, and steal the spotlight at any moment. These shiny, crinkly nylon pants were practically made for movement. If you showed up at school wearing a pair, you were telling the world you had rhythm and maybe a breakdancing routine waiting in the wings. They were baggy in all the right ways and came with enough zippers to start a conversation before you said a word. These pants swished when you walked and snapped when you danced. It was like wearing music. Kids who wore them knew where the weekend dance battles were happening, and they were probably the ones winning. The pants came in electric colors and metallic shades that screamed confidence. If you were not brave, you could not pull them off. And if you were brave, you were unforgettable. Parachute pants turned movement into art and fashion into performance. Watching Miami Vice was like getting a weekly crash course in danger, fashion, and cool. Crockett and Tubbs were not just cops, they were icons. The pastel suits, the slicked-back hair, the Ferrari, every detail was studied and imitated by kids who wanted to feel grown-up and untouchable. You might not understand all the plot lines, but you knew those two were smooth. Kids started rolling up their blazer sleeves and calling each other partner. If someone showed up in a white tee under a linen jacket, they were channeling Miami energy, whether they lived in the suburbs or not. The music, the colors, the swagger. It was a masterclass in confidence. The show made you feel like your boring little town had shadows and secrets too. Watching it made you feel dangerous without leaving your living room. Using Lisa Frank stationery was like writing your homework on a rainbow that exploded with glitter and joy. Every folder, notebook, and sticker sheet was a neon dreamscape of dolphins, unicorns, and smiley-faced suns, and if you had it, everyone noticed. It was not just school supplies, it was a personality in print. In a sea of drab brown notebooks and plain pencils, Lisa Frank was pure color therapy. You pulled a folder out of your backpack and immediately lit up the room. Suddenly, everyone wanted to borrow paper, even if they did not need any. They just wanted to hold it, stare at it, feel its magic. The stationery had its own gravitational pull, and the person who owned the most was always orbiting the top of the social universe. It was not just about having it, it was about showing it off. Decorating your binder with matching Lisa Frank stickers was like flexing gold jewelry. And if you coordinated your notebook covers, pencil case, and folder, that was elite status. There was a silent competition happening at every desk, and Lisa Frank girls were winning without even trying. Teachers might have rolled their eyes, but even they had to admit, this stuff made kids want to write. Homework got more attention. Notes to friends turned into miniature works of art. Passing a note on Lisa Frank paper meant you were sending a message and a mood. If someone handed you a neon, tiger-lined Post-it, that was a love letter, a friendship bracelet, and a sacred contract all in one. Lisa Frank was not just a brand. It was a vibe. And the people who lived in it? They were the glittering rulers of elementary school popularity. Playing the Nintendo Entertainment System in the 1980s was like stepping into a secret world where reflexes ruled and pixelated magic lived. If you had an NES, you were not just lucky. You were legendary. Your living room became a portal, your controller a tool of glory. Games like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid were not just games, they were rites of passage. Kids huddled around one TV, shouting directions, arguing over who got the next life, and memorizing warp zones like sacred scripture. If you beat a game, or even just got to the final boss, you were the hero of the hallway for days. And if someone came over and saw that classic gray console under your television, their respect for you tripled instantly. Owning an NES meant your house was the gathering spot. Sleepovers were planned around it. Friendships were forged through controller swaps and game over screens. Everyone had stories. That one time you nailed the perfect jump, that other time your little brother accidentally pulled the plug at the final level. The startup jingle of a cartridge booting up was like music from another universe. And if someone told you to blow on it when the game would not start, you knew exactly what they meant. That console taught you about patience, skill, and the thrill of finding a hidden one-up. It gave kids agency in a world where not much else did. You might have had homework, chores, and curfews, but when you were holding that rectangular controller, you were in control. Nintendo did not just entertain, it connected. It defined who got invited to hang out and who got left behind. NES owners were more than players. They were legends in pixel form. Wearing a slap bracelet in the 1980s was like wearing lightning on your wrist. It started straight, it snapped shut, and suddenly you were cool. Kids brought them to school in every color, print, and pattern imaginable. Zebra stripes, neon splatters, metallic rainbows. They looked like nothing else and sounded even better. That sharp snap was the battle cry of a generation, ringing through classrooms and lunchrooms like a social signal. You could slap it onto your own wrist or someone else's in a flash, making them jump, laugh, or glare in surprise. It was mischief, fashion, and flirtation all rolled into one slap of fabric-covered metal. You knew someone was cool if they wore more than one, stacked high, mismatched, and proud. Some kids even had a secret stash in their desk or backpack, ready to trade at recess like precious jewels. There was a rumor that they were dangerous, that someone got cut, that the metal inside could slice through skin. That only made them more desirable. Teachers banned them. Parents frowned at them. That just meant we wanted them even more. They were a perfect piece of rebellion you could wear in plain sight. They were tactile and loud in a world where most school accessories were silent and boring. Slap bracelets gave you something to fidget with, something to show off, and something to talk about. They broke the rules and snapped right back into place. If someone offered to let you try on theirs even just once, that was a gesture of trust. If you kept it, that was a silent vow of popularity. They may have started as dollar store toys, but on the wrist of a confident kid, slap bracelets were absolute power. Watching the A-Team was not just TV, it was an event, a weekly ritual that gave every kid a lesson in action, loyalty, and style. If you knew the intro by heart, in 1972 a crack commando unit was sent to prison. You were already ahead of the curve. This show was adrenaline in VHS form. Explosions, crazy gadgets, wild stunts, and characters who were larger than life. Everyone had a favorite. Hannibal with his plans, Face with his charm, Murdoch with his madness, and of course, Mr. T's B.A. Baracus. Mr. T alone was a cultural force. His mohawk, gold chains, and tough love catchphrases turned him into the poster child of cool toughness. Kids would quote him constantly, "I pity the fool," without ever really knowing what it meant. The show turned backyard games into high-octane missions. You would grab toy guns, water balloons, or anything you could throw and reenact scenes like your life depended on it. The A-Team taught you to build with scraps, improvise under pressure, and stick with your crew no matter what. The van became as iconic as any superhero cape. Even if your parents did not let you stay up to watch it, you found a way. Taped episodes, sleepovers, or sneaking peeks from the hallway. Watching it meant you had taste. Talking about it the next day gave you clout. And if you dressed like any of them on Halloween, that was a statement of ultimate commitment. The A-Team was not just a show, it was an identity. Rocking a rat tail or feathered hair in the 1980s was like wearing a flag that screamed, "I do not care what you think, I look awesome." Hair was not just hair, it was a declaration, a choice, a risk. The feathered look, blown out, layered, and flicked back like Farrah Fawcett or Rob Lowe, was the crown jewel of cool. You needed volume, a hairdryer, and commitment. Walking into school with that style meant you had spent time in the mirror, and it showed. But the rat tail? That was something else entirely. It was one long tail of hair, braided, beaded, or just hanging loose, peeking from an otherwise regular haircut. It whispered rebellion and smirked at conformity. Teachers hated it. Parents groaned. But your peers? They respected the nerve. You could not fake a rat tail. You had to grow it, protect it, and wear it proudly even when people called it weird. Some kids dyed the tip, others tied it off with neon rubber bands. It was a badge of independence. If someone touched it without asking, that meant war. You could rock both styles if you were bold enough. Blowout in the front, tail in the back. The best hair got you noticed before you even spoke. And in a time when social standing could shift with a glance, your hair gave you a head start. Trends came and went, but if you had the guts to wear one of these cuts, you were unforgettable. If you were a kid in the 1980s, there were two ways to rebel. You could get grounded, or you could collect garbage Pail Kids. What started as a gross-out parody of wholesome Cabbage Patch Kids quickly mutated into one of the most controversial and overstimulating franchises of the decade. The trading cards were wild enough, oozing noses, melting eyeballs, radioactive vomit. But that was just the beginning. Suddenly, they were everywhere. Garbage Pail Kids lunchboxes, bed sheets, pajamas, notebooks, puzzles, even Halloween costumes. It was like someone said, "What if childhood was more disgusting?" And the market responded, "Yes, please." Parents hated them. Teachers banned them. Some schools even confiscated them on site. But for kids, they were pure rebellion in sticker form. Every new pack was a gamble. Would you get Atom Bomb or Leaky Lindsay? Either way, it was peak 1980s absurdity, but the brand overdid it. What once felt underground became overexposed, and by the time the infamous Garbage Pail Kids movie dropped in theaters, it was game over. Gross became exhausting. The merch wave collapsed under its own snot-covered weight. Still, it was fun while it lasted. Now, let us talk about another trend that looked sweet and innocent, until summer arrived and your feet begged for mercy. Speak and Spell. A name so simple, you almost forget just how advanced it felt. This little orange learning machine had a robotic voice that felt both comforting and unsettling at the same time. The keys were rubbery. The screen was a small LED display, and the second it powered on, you felt like a kid genius. This was not just a toy, it was a computer. At least to us it was. And for a lot of people, it was the first time they ever heard a machine talk to them like a teacher would. It would ask you to spell elephant or photograph in that slow, mechanical voice. If you got it wrong, it would buzz like you had just activated some kind of self-destruct sequence. And if you nailed it, that same robotic voice gave you praise like it meant something, like it knew you. Speak and Spell was part game, part lesson, and 100% magic. You did not need Wi-Fi. You did not need batteries half the time. All you needed was the imagination to believe that this talking toy was the smartest machine in the house. And sometimes, it probably was. Of course, intelligence was one thing, but style? That was another story. If you were the kid with this next item, everyone knew you had your life together. No one was ready. Not the music industry, not the public. Not even the moon, which he would soon walk across. In 1982, Michael Jackson released Thriller, a title that would come to define the very heartbeat of pop culture. This was not just an album, it was a tidal wave. Every track felt like it could carry its own legacy, but it was the music video, the short film really, that sent shockwaves through every living room in America. Red leather jackets, ghoulish dance moves, Vincent Price's eerie monologue echoing into a generation's dreams. It was scary. It was sexy. It was genius. Thriller redefined what a pop star could be. Michael was no longer just a singer. He was a world builder, a visual storyteller, a phenomenon. He shattered racial barriers on MTV, igniting a cultural shift that went beyond music. Parents, kids, teens, grandmothers, everyone danced, everyone watched. Thriller became a global obsession, and suddenly Halloween had a new anthem: the glove, the lean, the laugh. It was not just entertainment, it was an event. To be alive in the 80s was to live in the shadow of Thriller. And to this day, nothing has ever moved quite like it. If the lights went out in the 1980s, chances are something in your room lit up. Glow-in-the-dark stickers were slapped on every surface known to humankind. Bedroom ceilings became constellations. Alarm clocks glowed like miniature UFOs. Light switch covers, shoelaces, trapper keepers, even toothbrushes. Nothing was safe from the radioactive green charm of phosphorescent novelty. And as a kid, it was magic. You charged them up under a lamp, turned off the lights, and suddenly your room was a planetarium. Sort of. The glow would last about 30 seconds. And then, nothing. But those 30 seconds? Pure wonder. The problem came when the adhesive gave out and the stickers peeled off, leaving weird, dusty outlines on your walls. Or when the glow effect faded completely, leaving behind little blobs of dead plastic. Still, the trend exploded. Kids wanted to glow. Toys were made with it. T-shirts were printed with it. Some even tried to make glow-in-the-dark nail polish. The 80s loved the idea of visibility, especially in the dark. But while glowing stars were subtle, the next trend was anything but. Let us talk about the fashion moment that made teenagers look like they were headed straight for the football field. Shoulder pads, anyone? The Columbia House penny deal felt like a loophole in the universe. You sent in a little card, maybe glued a few stamps to it, and next thing you knew, your mailbox was blessed with 12 brand new cassette tapes, or compact discs if you were ahead of the curve. All for just 1 cent. 1 cent. It felt like a scam in your favor. No way this is real, you thought. But there it was. Whitney Houston, Prince, Bon Jovi, Huey Lewis, boom! Delivered to your doorstep like you were some kind of record label executive. Of course, the catch was that you had to buy more albums at full price later. Parents were suspicious. Some tried to stop you. Others fell into the trap themselves. It was like a rite of passage. A shared secret. A little music heist you got away with. Until the bill came due, of course. Still, there was no denying the power of opening that box. Shrink-wrapped covers. That new plastic smell. Your very own collection. But for real-time music discovery? You only needed one thing. 3 letters, 1 channel, and a whole lot of attitude. It started with 6 colors, just 6. But somehow, it unlocked a puzzle that would challenge millions of minds and define an era. The Rubik's Cube was not just a toy. It was an obsession, a flex, a frustration, and a badge of honor, all crammed into a twisting, clicking square. You either solved it, or you peeled the stickers off. There was no in-between. Classrooms, kitchens, and family living rooms were all temporary battlegrounds for who could line up the colors first. It looked simple, but it demanded patience, logic, and a kind of determination that made it feel like a test of character. And oh, the speed solvers, like magicians, like gods. The cube became a status symbol among kids and a stress toy for adults. It was everywhere: commercials, competitions, cereal box giveaways. You were not cool if you had not at least tried to conquer it. For a moment, the Rubik's Cube was the brainy heart of the decade, a symbol of what it meant to be smart and stylish. It taught an entire generation to keep twisting, keep trying, and keep believing that order could come from chaos. Let us be real. Shoulder pads were not just a fashion statement. They were a fashion exclamation. And somehow they trickled down from business suits and power blazers to teenagers. Yes, nothing says youthful rebellion quite like looking like you are gearing up for a scrimmage with the Chicago Bears. In the 1980s, you could barely pick up a sweater or jacket without finding a pair of foam triangles stuffed into the lining. For adults, it was about power dressing. For teens, it was just confusing. You would throw on your favorite sweatshirt and suddenly look like a linebacker on picture day. They made you look older, broader, and weirdly more square. Removing them was a gamble. They were usually sewn in with all the stubbornness of a century-old family secret. But for a while, they were everywhere. Dances, school photos, family reunions. Looking back, it is hard to say what the appeal really was. Maybe we all wanted to look like business executives trapped in high school. But if shoulder pads were trying to make kids look powerful, the next musical invention went even further. It said, let us wear our entire keyboard as a guitar. Let us talk about the rise and rapid fall of the keytar. Saturday morning cartoons were not just shows. They were rituals. You would wake up at 6 or 7, bowl of cereal in hand, and stake out your spot in front of the television before anyone else in the house even stirred, pajamas still on, eyes still half shut. But you were ready. The networks fought hard for your attention. ABC, NBC, CBS, they all rolled out animated powerhouses like The Smurfs, He-Man, The Real Ghostbusters, Gem, G.I. Joe, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Each show had its slot, and missing one felt like missing a holiday. But for every golden episode came the heartbreak of your favorite show being bumped, or worse, replaced. The dreaded special news report could interrupt your flow like a slap to the face. You would sit there in disbelief as your cartoon got pulled for a political debate or weather update. No warnings, no mercy. Still, the lineup gave you something to look forward to all week, and for those few hours, everything felt right in the world. Cartoons, cereal, and commercials that somehow got stuck in your head forever. Because let's be honest, there are still jingles from that era that we can sing from memory, word for word. They were not just dolls, they were your children, adopted, named, cared for like living, breathing extensions of your heart. Cabbage Patch Kids exploded into American homes like nothing else before them. Chubby cheeks, yarn hair, signed bottoms, they were adorable and slightly strange. But they were yours. No two were the same. That was the magic. It felt personal, like fate. Parents fought in department stores to get them. Shelves emptied in seconds. News clips showed grown adults wrestling over plush plastic babies. It was not just a toy. It was a phenomenon. And it swept through the country like a fever dream. Kids brought them everywhere, to school, to bed, to dinner. They came with birth certificates and backstories, turning playtime into family drama. In an age of make-believe, these dolls made things feel real. The craze might sound ridiculous today, but in the moment, it was everything. A doll you had to adopt? That was not just marketing, it was genius. It made you feel responsible, important, part of something. And when the madness faded, what was left was a memory of wide-eyed joy, pure affection, and a little friend who made childhood feel alive. The mini boombox was supposed to be the coolest thing you could clip onto your belt. A pint-sized party machine, a radio revolution in your pocket. But in reality, it was all look, no boom. These things were everywhere in the late 1980s, bright, plastic, and usually in neon colors that matched your windbreaker. They were meant to let you carry your music wherever you went, like a portable dance party. Except the sound quality was trash. The volume was barely louder than a whisper. If you were outside, forget it. Wind was louder. And the tape deck constantly ate your favorite cassette, if it even had a tape deck. A lot of them were just FM radios disguised as full-function players. But hey, they looked cool. They had fake speakers, shiny knobs, and some even had stickers that made them look high-tech. You could strut down the sidewalk, mini boombox on your hip, headphones plugged in, until the batteries died an hour later. And that was the end of that. So yes, it flopped. But it flopped with style. And if you thought that was noisy, wait until we revisit the school supply that became an auditory menace in classrooms across America. The Velcro Symphony, known as the Trapper Keeper. Made-for-television movies in the 1980s were not just filler. They were events. Whole nights were planned around them. When that promo would come on, this Sunday, only on ABC, you would perk up, lean in, and make mental notes to not miss it. This was before DVR, before pause buttons. You missed it? You missed it. These movies had titles like The Day After, V, The Final Battle, or The Ewok Adventure. Some were tearjerkers, some were thrillers, some were straight-up terrifying. And they had you glued to the screen, wondering how they managed to squeeze so much drama into 2 hours. Plus, commercials. Families would make popcorn, dim the lights, and treat it like it was an actual premiere. You watched it live together, and you talked about it the next day at school. Because chances were, everyone saw it too. They hit different. The music, the narration, even that grainy picture. It all added to the mood. You were not just watching. You were part of something. And right in the middle of those movies came the strange intermissions, ones that could go from innocent to haunting in 5 seconds flat. Before Nintendo, video games were gasping for breath. After Nintendo, they were alive again. It was 1985 when the Nintendo Entertainment System hit American shelves and changed living rooms forever. The gray and red console was a Trojan horse, simple in design but hiding worlds inside. Suddenly, you were not just a kid. You were Mario, leaping through pipes to save the princess. You were Link, braving dungeons for the Triforce. You were part of something massive. Nintendo did not just bring games. It brought heroes. It brought soundtracks you could hum in your sleep and cheat codes whispered like secret spells. The controller became an extension of your hand. Blowing into cartridges felt like a ritual, and beating a level felt like beating life itself. For many, Nintendo was not a toy. It was a friend, a daily escape, a safe place to fail and try again. Families gathered around the screen, arguing over whose turn it was. Siblings became rivals, parents got curious, and the living room was never the same again. With every beep and pixel, Nintendo gave us wonder, and it never asked for anything more than time and imagination. Before padded gym floors and TikTok dance tutorials, there was the breakdancing board. It was exactly what it sounds like. A portable, foldable square of cardboard with a brick wall graphic or checkerboard print meant to simulate the streets. Because nothing says urban grit like unfolding a fake alleyway in your suburban driveway. These things were lightweight, glossy, and slid around on every surface. In theory, they let you spin, pop, and lock without bruising your spine on concrete. In reality, they slid out from under you mid-move, causing more scraped elbows than applause. But in the moment, they felt cool. They turned any parking lot into a stage. Throw on some Run DMC, slap that cardboard down, and suddenly you were in it. Never mind that it bent after 2 uses and warped in the rain. You were performing. You were part of something. Until the corner curled up or the board tore in half while trying to nail a backspin. But that was the 80s. Function took a backseat to flair. And speaking of flair, our next trend lets you turn every sweatshirt into a personal fashion statement. Or a wearable art disaster. You had not lived until you beat the Oregon Trail without dying of dysentery. That was the holy grail of 1980s computer gaming. Those chunky gray computers in the school lab, that pixelated map, that relentless text box reminding you that little Timothy had broken a leg and your oxen just drowned crossing a river. Iconic. It was not just a game, it was survival. You learned real-life lessons in that pixel wilderness, like how much meat you could carry back from a hunt, not much, or why you should never try to ford a river without thinking it through. And somehow, we were totally into it. The green and black graphics, the clunky keyboard, the fact that it felt like schoolwork but kind of fun. You would all huddle around one screen, a group of 5 kids making group decisions like mini pioneers, and somehow it felt like the fate of your wagon family actually mattered. It was your first taste of choices in gaming. your first little moral dilemmas. Do you trade clothing for bullets? Do you rest for 2 days? Or do you push on and risk everyone freezing to death? Still, once the school bell rang, it was game over. And if you wanted to know what was playing in theaters that weekend, you did not Google it. You picked up the phone. Hip-hop was born in the Bronx, but in the 80s, it exploded into every corner of American life. It was not just a sound, it was a movement. And when Run DMC hit the stage in Adidas tracksuits and shell-toe sneakers, you knew the world was about to change. This was more than music. It was poetry over beats, rhythm over silence, truth over noise. The 80s marked hip-hop's rise from underground parties to global power. LL Cool J, Public Enemy, Grandmaster Flash. These were not just rappers. They were messengers. Each lyric felt like a coded message from the streets, a heartbeat from the city itself. Hip-hop spoke about struggle, pride, injustice, and survival in a way that made you stop, listen, and feel. And the style? Just as fierce. Gold chains, Kangol hats, boomboxes on shoulders. This was fashion with purpose. The look was bold, but the voice behind it was louder. Breakdancing hit sidewalks like fire. Graffiti tagged the city with identity. And everywhere you turned, the bass dropped like a gavel. Hip-hop turned sneakers into icons and turned raw truth into chart toppers. It did not ask for a seat at the table. It built its own table, right there on the pavement. And anyone who came of age in the 80s knew they were witnessing the rise of a new American language, one that still speaks volumes. Before cell phones, there were landlines. And before minimalism, there were designer phone covers. And boy, did the 1980s go all in. You could not just have a phone, you had to dress it. We are talking fur-lined receivers, leopard print handsets, and rhinestone-covered cradles. Nothing screamed glamour like trying to have a conversation with what looked like a bedazzled chinchilla pressed against your ear. There was even one that looked like a hamburger. Why? No one really knows. But the 1980s were not about asking why. They were about asking, does this come in glitter pink? People wanted their rotary phones to match their shag carpet and floral wallpaper, and these accessories delivered poorly. The covers fell apart. They muffled the sound. And let us be honest, no emergency call was improved by digging through a layer of sequins. It turned something simple into a full-time job. You had to prepare to use your phone. The trend eventually fizzled out, mostly because the novelty wore off and the practicality never existed in the first place. Still, the 1980s loved their flair, especially when you could wear it, like, say, around your neck in the most jingly way possible. Owning a Trapper Keeper in the 1980s felt like owning a briefcase made just for kids, but with neon colors, Velcro, and personality. These were not just folders. These were statements. You did not just store your homework in a Trapper Keeper. You stored your identity. From bold geometric designs to wild illustrations of race cars, dolphins, or laser grids that looked like they belonged in a science fiction movie, the outside of your Trapper Keeper said something about you. And that satisfying rip of the Velcro? That was music. It had pockets for pencils, slots for notes, compartments you never used but felt cooler just knowing they were there. There was something so absurdly organized about them that it made you want to turn your life into a schedule. You would write the dates on your notebook dividers, color-code your subjects, and then forget all of it by Wednesday. But hey, the effort was there. You felt important carrying one around. It made you feel like you were growing up, and even if you never opened it for anything other than doodling weird cartoons during math class, it still felt like a win. But when it came to keeping track of things, there was one object that really made you feel like a collector, and not just of stuff, but of memories. The future did not arrive with a bang. It arrived in a beige plastic box that hummed quietly on a desk in the corner of your house. The Commodore 64, the Apple Macintosh. These were not just machines, they were portals into something entirely new. You typed, and the screen listened. You clicked, and doors opened. At first, it was simple. Word processors, floppy disks, a little green cursor blinking like it had a secret. But quickly, it became more: games, learning, possibility. For kids, it was a playground. For parents, a tool. For dreamers, a revolution. It changed homework. It changed jobs. It changed you. That blinking cursor? It whispered that anything was possible. Families gathered around, just trying to figure it out together. The sound of a printer was like the future on paper. And the internet? Still a myth. Still a whisper. But you felt it coming. With every boot-up chime, every pixelated game, every painstaking keystroke, you were stepping into a new world. Personal computers did not just change technology. They changed lives. And for the first time ever, the future was not in a sci-fi movie. It was sitting on your desk. Back before virtual reality, ViewMaster Reels were the closest thing to teleportation we had. A small red plastic viewer, chunky and indestructible, that you held up to your face like some kind of sci-fi binoculars. But inside, whole worlds waited. You'd flick the lever with your thumb and instantly jump from a still frame of Mount Rushmore to a three-dimensional jungle scene with elephants that felt like they could walk right out of the frame. Some reels were cartoons, others were travel photos, some were straight-up educational, which somehow made you like them even more. They were quiet, simple, and personal. You did not share your ViewMaster. That was yours. A private little universe. Every kid had their favorite reel. Maybe it was the one with dinosaurs. Maybe it was the space shuttle. Whatever it was your escape hatch from a math worksheet or a rainy Saturday. The 1980s weren't about flashy screens or downloads. They were about plastic, paper, light, and wonder. And somehow, that was enough. Actually, it was more than enough. But if you really wanted to feel like you were holding the future in your hands, you did not stop at a ViewMaster. You went for the gadget that talked back. There are hairstyles, and then there are structural engineering projects. Gravity-defying bangs, held aloft by industrial-strength hairspray, were the crown jewels of 1980s style. We are talking sky-high, shellacked to perfection, immovable bangs that could survive a hurricane. You did not just style your hair, you sculpted it. And the glue that held it all together? A can of Aquanet, the unofficial perfume of the decade. One spritz was never enough. You held that button down until the room filled with fog and your lungs begged for mercy. It was how you knew your bangs were officially done. They had to crunch when you tapped them. These bangs had volume, attitude, and possibly their own zip code. They required teasing, patience, and a total disregard for the ozone layer. Parents disapproved. Schools banned combs in lockers. But if your bangs did not touch the ceiling of your school photo backdrop, were you even living? It was extreme. It was ridiculous. And it was glorious. But eventually, the sky-high trend lost steam, and pastel blazers tried to take over the fashion throne. Spoiler alert, not everyone could pull off Crockett from Miami Vice. The Pee-Chee folder was like a social billboard. Everyone had one. Those tan or yellow folders with athletes printed in faded ink on the front. Football players mid-tackle, baseball players mid-swing. They were meant to be neutral, practical, but they never stayed that way. Because the moment that folder landed on your desk, it became a war zone of doodles, lightning bolts, band logos, stencils, flames, hearts with names inside them, graffiti letters that took 15 tries to get right. Every inch of it became your personal art gallery or battlefield. These things aged like ancient relics by the time June came around. It did not matter how boring the class was. Your Pee-Chee folder made sure you had something to focus on, something to claim. And if a substitute teacher tried to take it away, that was a declaration of war. Of course, personal style extended beyond the page, because it was not just about what you carried. It was about what you wore. And in the 1980s, you had better know how to roll your jeans or risk social exile. Saturday mornings were sacred. You rolled out of bed in your pajamas, poured a sugary mountain of cereal, and turned on the television like it was a portal to another world. And what greeted you? Magic. Pure animated magic. Shows like He-Man, Transformers, DuckTales, and the Smurfs made those few hours feel like a festival of joy. These were not just cartoons, they were lifelines. The stories were bold, the heroes fearless, and the villains just scary enough to make victory feel earned. You learned about justice from turtles in bandanas, loyalty from robotic cars, and friendship from ponies with glittering eyes. Commercial breaks were an art form. The toys matched the shows, and the shows matched your dreams. This was marketing fused with myth-making, and we loved every second. Your parents saw it as noise, but you knew better. It was a weekly escape from school, chores, and whatever sadness the week might have brought. Those mornings felt endless, like time itself was bending in your favor. The television glowed with color and hope. And as the final credits rolled and the sun climbed higher, you held on to those last cartoon moments like a secret handshake only kids understood. If this took you back, comment your 80s flex, like the video, and subscribe for more blasts from the past.